All right, let's look at Nigeria's real estate sector now. It's been significantly influenced by a combination of inflation, currency devaluation, which has also impacted both domestic and foreign investments into the sector. In 2024, real construction growth rate, that dipped in the first quarter, but rose again in the second quarter. We saw a recovery there. Data from the NBS. So there was a major drop right here in 2020. That was the second quarter of 2020. Q3 got a recovery. Then fast forward all the way to 2024. Q1, we saw that dip there. Then a recovery for the second quarter of 2024. Then if you also look at prices of real estate, because of what we've seen with inflation and currency devaluation, also being an import-dependent economy. If you look at the property prices so far in the likes of, let's say, if you're trying to get a detached house in maybe Adeni Jones now in Ikeja, that's highbrow, that ranges from about 350 million naira. If you're looking at detached in, say, Ogba, 250 million naira. And these prices were not like this. When the exchange rate was pegged at around 400 to 300 naira to the dollar. So these were maybe ranging around 50 to 60 million. But with the devaluation we've seen so far, then if you come all the way to Lekki Phase 1, 750 million. That's the going range for detached house. Then areas after Lekki Phase 1, let's say Orchid Road area, that's attracting a massive 300 million if you're trying to buy in those parts. Then maybe low end, the low end area, somewhere like Ojodu is now commanding between 100 to 250 million naira for a detached house. And definitely a lot of conversations around, the mortgage system in Nigeria. That's been plagued by high interest rates because we have the central bank on one hand, trying to tame inflation, and they've been raising rates, for the longest time, and also trying to mop up excess liquidity from the Nigerian economy. And definitely that has impacted on most of these prices. How are Nigerians able to access affordable mortgage to actually make this happen? But let's have this conversation now. We have Modupe Anjos, is ESV Modupe Anjos, is the MD CEO, Rydal Mills Limited, and she's joining me right here in the studio. It's great to have you. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm sorry, I know the traffic that held you. It caught me, coming to the office myself, but finally, you made it here.
Yes, thank you for having me.
It's great to have you. Yeah. So a lot playing out in this market. Looking at these prices, as a salary earner, I'm wondering how I'm going to be able to afford this, even with the kind of mortgage system that we run in Nigeria right now. It's we have interest rates from 25 to over 30% at this point. So that's looking like I cannot afford a mortgage at this point. So how are you seeing the sector, so far in 2024? Well,
we're in very unprecedented times in Nigeria at the moment. And the real estate sector, I can say that Nigeria is playing in a very moderate growth at the moment. Even with the challenges that we have in Nigeria, we're in a very moderate growth. And I'll say a moderate growth because with the devaluation of the Naira, it's giving the people in the diaspora opportunities to want to invest in Nigeria. And because they have a stronger currency, a lot of demands are coming in. However, because the cost of building materials have significantly increased, developers have to increase the prices of properties, which also would mean that the local people are unable to afford these properties at the moment. But because of the devaluation as well, investors are looking at shifting investments into real estate because real estate is growing astronomically. And then when we look at all the major urban areas in Nigeria, Lagos, Abuja, and Port Harcourt, for instance, with some of the infrastructure development that is ongoing in Nigeria, new roads, the bridge going from all the way from Lagos all the way to cross rivers and all of that, it enhances development. But developers are going through a lot of headaches right now because they have to increase the prices of their properties significantly.
And with property increase, I'm wondering, what's demand really looking at? You did mention, diaspora, they have stronger currency at this point, so they're able to pour that in.
I'll tell you, the demand is high. The demand is growing because, just like I mentioned earlier, people's investment, people are shifting. There's a paradigm shift. People are shifting from the stocks market and some of the forms of investment that they've keyed into, and they're trying to secure their funds in the real estate market, because the real estate market, in terms of stability, is stable. It might not give you enough liquidity immediately, but it's appreciating. So there's a demand from people that have access to funds already, from the diaspora market and investors, local investors.
Right, and talking about, everyone's trying to beat inflation at this point and also try to beat currency devaluation, most investors, in this country. So, we keep touting different asset classes as that inflation hedge.
Yes.
Is real estate in Nigeria still that?
Oh, certainly. Real estate in Nigeria, in terms of inflation, the inflation would affect real estate in all ways. Like I said, developers are finding it difficult to buy materials, building materials at the cost in which they used to buy these materials for initially. Now they're buying it at a higher cost. Inflation has come to play in that regard. However, and then the rental values have gone up significantly because it's a ripple effect. When the cost of a property goes up, the return on investment on that property has to be able to be commensurate with the value at which you're buying the property. So the rental values for the property have gone up. But the supply of properties in comparison with the demand in property right now, considering that we have a minimum of 20 million housing deficit, not to talk of the number of people that we have not put into the population census, So the investors will consider buying because they know there's a high demand, which would also be affected in terms of inflation.
Right, and I was speaking to someone earlier, and he did tell me his landlord increased his rent, recently, citing, the same issues at this point. So it's like sitting tenants are not having that privilege at this point, because most of the time, a sitting tenant would be, afforded some, good value, when it comes to rent. But now we're seeing the landlords having to hike, even on sitting tenants. They're not waiting to kick them out and getting new tenants.
So we are vast in property management. So when you talk about sitting tenants and new tenants, we're in the core of it in my organization. So sitting tenants are also affected, even though incoming tenants are significantly affected because they have no choice. But a sitting tenant can negotiate his ways, well, if he has a considerate landlord.
Maybe good behavior.
Not necessarily. He shouldn't have a relationship that will show character behavior on his property. Having said that, owners and investors, they are also looking at increasing prices because of inflation, devaluation of the Naira, the use of the funds. What your money can buy for you now is like 50% of what he could buy for you a couple of months ago. I'm not talking about a year ago. We have a project that we're marketing at the moment, and would you believe that the price of that project has increased on 3 occasions? And it has not been delivered yet. So everybody has to meet up with the cost of funds. So a landlord might have international commitments, and he would also look at the cost of the funds that he's getting from the property that is on rent.
Right. So definitely challenging times in that market. And I love the way, developed economies, track their housing markets. At least in the U.S., most of the week we're getting, household housing data, most of the time. But here we're still trying to, get our fingers on data when it comes to, new developments and sales and all of that. So looking at 2024, generally, would you say realtors, did they cash out in 2024?
Or did investors cash out?
Right.
Not realtors. We are just middlemen,
right,
if you would say so. So every year, there's a reason why there's an increase in demand for real estate. In 2024, the devaluation, the inflation has caused a ripple effect in the demand for real estate. However, a majority of Nigerians cannot afford this real estate. Like you mentioned earlier, mortgages are not, they're nowhere to be getting close to, because you're getting a minimum of 30% on a mortgage from a commercial bank. So I will say to you that even if it feels like investors are cashing out in terms of real estate purchase, increase in the value of the property, you also need to understand that the value at which they are buying the property now is astronomically high. So we're looking at properties in Lekki 1 going at 750 million for a detached house. Meanwhile, a year ago, there's probably a 200 million less on that same property. So the purchasing power of people has not increased. So I don't call it cashing out. I just feel that, I believe that people are buying because there is a lot of uncertainty, and they're trying to hold on to their funds and make sure that their funds don't devalue anymore.
Right, and we know shelter. Very, very important in the scheme of things.
Certainly.
Well, thank you so much. It was great having your perspective. ESV Modukwe Andros is the MD CEO, Rider Mills Limited, and she made it regardless of the traffic. Thank you so much.
That is part of the infrastructure deficit we're talking about.
Exactly. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.